Thank you, all of you, for sticking around. I'm noted to some folks about this panel. I don't know if I've ever been able to put together a panel with four different sets of interests as diverse as this one. We were trying to figure out the connection between them, and there's, except that they are all major sectors of the U.S. economy. So I think that's what we're reflecting, is people who have a view on agriculture, technology, biotech, which I guess there's an overlap there, and the aluminum sector. We're delightful to have you all there, and really great friend of Wida Nova Daly, who's been very active in the trade world for many years, and a good friend of all of ours, agreed to moderate. Thank you, Nova. Everybody, you've got your bios and your packets, and Nova doesn't need to do that introduction, but with that, I'm going to turn it over to him to take over this discussion of sectoral interests in China. Thanks, Nova.
Great. Thank you, Ken, so much, and thank you, Wida, for hosting this very timely event and the panel on sectorial issues on the U.S.-China trade relationship. It's especially very interesting in the context rubric of Mr. Pomfrey's extremely informative work that shows the ebbs and flows of the U.S.-China relationship in terms of trade, how we assess each other, and how we engage each other. So we are now at a very historical point in time. So I'm honored to host this panel. We have some exceptional folks up here. Ambassador Better here served in many different posts within the U.S. government and on many sectorial issues in promoting U.S. goods getting abroad. And so it's excellent that she's here today. Mr. Atkinson, who continues to be a thought leader for U.S. innovation and technology. Mr. Damon, who has also gone from serving his country to serving to promote U.S. leadership in biotechnology and science. And then Mr. Johnson, who is helping, and I'm framing this, to ensure that the U.S. continues to be a leader in aluminum technology and production and manufacturing. So as for this panel, what we're going to do is just each panelist is going to give about 6 minutes discussion of the U.S. trade relationship sectorially in their views per their sector. And then following that, I may ask questions, but really I want you all to think about questions, because this is an excellent panel and you all are smart. And I shouldn't be the one driving this one. But please do. I'll turn to you all to ask questions. If you don't, if you're shy, I'm going to ask a few of my own. So, that said, I think we're in a historical time in this country to really evaluate what we've been doing on trade, what we can do better, and how we can make sure that we continue to be leaders in innovation and manufacturing here in this country. So, with that, Anne, I turn to Ms. Becker.
Thank you very much, Noah, and thanks for having me here this morning. It's a pleasure to be able to talk a little bit about the U.S.-China agricultural relationship, and just thought I would frame it briefly for you this morning, and then we can go back and get to some of the questions. I think the most important thing to remember when it comes to the U.S.-China ag relationship is we really need each other in the short term and in the long term, and that's not about to change. And so not nurturing that relationship or opting out or backing away from that, I don't think is really an option. We need each other in the barest terms in supply and demand. The U.S. is a surplus agricultural producer. We will continue to be that, and there are 1 billion plus people in China who also need to eat. And so we will be a key supplier for them going forward. They are our biggest export market for soybeans. They are a leading market for our corn. If you think about fiber, the textile industry in China really drives global cotton markets. Just a hint of what they might do with their cotton reserve creates global volatility in cotton prices. We export over 80% of the cotton we grow. Same is true for protein. We know China is eating more beef, pork, and poultry and dairy. We're key exporters of those products as well. And it's also true in horticulture. The biggest market for our nuts and our dried fruits is China. And so all of our agricultural regions and across the spectrum of our commodities need that key customer. China also needs us. They are not in a position where they're going to be food self-sufficient. And while they have generally stated that as a goal, they know that imports are a key part of achieving food security for them. longer term, China needs to modernize its food sector if it's going to be able to meet increasing demands for food consumption, but also if it's going to address some of those sources of unrest we've already heard about, which has to do with environmental degradation and pollution, and agricultural practices have been a key part of that in the past and contributing to that. And so they know that they have to increase the scale and the efficiency of their agriculture, and they need to be producing in a way that can be less harmful and actually remediate some of the environmental damage that they have seen. And we need them to do that if we're going to meet climate change goals that we have. These are our global problems of pollution, and so we need them to get on that scale as well. And we have to be engaged with them on several levels for that to happen. But at the same time that China is trying to domestically feed its people better and improve its operations and bring imports into the fold, they also have tensions, and I think Melanie really hit on this very well in the last panel, which is the high pace of urbanization in China, the need to make sure rural livelihoods are maintained. They will not put that at risk. And so if changes in the ag sector are going too fast, if they haven't figured out how to incorporate those new technologies in a way that are beneficial, you're going to see fits and starts, and that's what we see in our relationship with China now. They want to control the pace and the method by which they make changes in their ag sector, and they probably won't let trade rules get in the way of how they do that. If you look just at our trade in corn and the acceptance of biotechnology, when they needed additional supply of corn for their livestock producers, for their internal food needs, that corn entered without problem. When the domestically supported corn price in China was high and they had an overflowing supply of high-priced domestic corn, you suddenly saw a lot of testing at the border for our biotech events, and a lot of problems with that corn entering into China. And so they can use quickly policies at the border to turn on and off the spigot to help them to control the pace of change. And I don't necessarily see that changing anytime soon, but we can help and engage with them to maybe make that less frequent, to work with others to increase pressure on them to be more transparent, more consistent, and open about what those policies are. Some of you may have seen last week their planning document that came out from China for the first time in over a decade did not use the word self-sufficiency in agriculture. That's a big deal. They have already moved away from price support policies in corn. Again, a crop that takes a lot of inputs and a lot of water to raise, two things China doesn't have a lot to spare in that regard. They have not moved away in that new document from price support in wheat and in rice, but did say that the way they set that domestic support price will put the market more in control going forward. Now, I'd like to think that the WTO case we brought against China this fall that challenged the amount of money they were putting into that domestic support for wheat, rice, and corn has accelerated that conversation a bit in China. We know there's been an internal debate about the cost of these domestic support policies and about the way they encourage misuse of natural resources and overproduction of crops that may not be in China's long-term interest. So I'd like to think we tip the hand of those internal reformers to say there's both external and internal pressure now for them to go toward a more market-based policy, and I think we need to keep using those tools going forward. So again, I think encouraging policy change through enforcement and through engagement in our international institutions, but through our bilateral engagement as well. We do a lot with China. We jointly do research in forestry and crop insurance and all sorts of things where we offer that assistance. We work through our industry associations who provide outreach and are developing their markets in China as well, and I think we could do that in a more coordinated fashion to help drive change in that agricultural sector as well. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I can't talk about sort of ag, I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about aluminum other than I use it. I don't really cook. But I do think a lot, and our think tank thinks a lot about advanced industries and innovation-based industries, and sitting next to one right here, bio. But I'll focus today on really IT and all the way sort of from semiconductors all the way up to, if you will, apps and internet. China is like many nations around the world. They want to grow their advanced technology industries. They see them as high value-added sectors that are going to raise standards of living. So I think it's important to recognize that that's the new war. We sort of lost the old war, if you will, about commodity manufacturing. And I think there's very clear evidence, despite what a lot of people in Washington think, that that war did cost the U.S. a significant number of jobs. Rob Scott's work, David Otter's work, our work, at least half of the U.S. manufacturing job loss in the 2000s was related to that. But I think what's important to recognize is that this is not simply about them seeking comparative advantage or worrying about there's some market distortions here. I mean, part of the problem with how we think about the tech issue in China is that it tends to be driven by economists, and economists think about markets and are they in equilibrium or not in equilibrium. The Chinese aren't thinking about equilibrium. The Chinese are thinking about this from a business strategy perspective. And to me, the best way to frame that is a recent Harvard Business Review article, and the title of the article, and I think they wrote a book too, is called Hardball, 5 Killer Strategies for Trouncing the Competition. The Chinese are playing hardball. We're playing softball. They don't want to gain comparative advantage. They want to trounce the competition. I think that's the most important takeaway here. They want to dominate a vast array of technology sectors, put other countries out of business, as they sort of did with our solar panel industry, and then gain global market share in it. And you see that, 2015, President Xi talks about the goal of China being, quote, master of its own technologies. What does that mean? Aren't you in a trading system? Not the way they think in this. They want to master their core technologies. And when you look at the Chinese technology plans, the Made in China 2025 strategy, the 13th five-year plan for science and technology, the 13th five-year plan for national informatization, the national security, cybersecurity strategy, they all have that same frame. How can China take away, reduce imports, gain more market share for their domestic suppliers, domestic companies, and then go out and dominate global markets? Good example, that's the Made in China 2025 strategy, calls for 70% local content in semiconductors. And then the implementation of that is to put out $150 billion in government money to subsidize Chinese semiconductor firms, including buying U.S. firms and foreign firms in general. The national cybersecurity strategy is essentially using the Snowden revelations as a pretense to deny access to Chinese technology firms in a wide array of sectors. Most recently, cloud computing. The U.S. dominates the cloud computing industries. We have the best companies in the world, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and others. And yet, under the new cybersecurity strategy and the laws that have come out from that, they basically made it illegal for U.S. cloud computing companies to provide services there. If they're going to provide services there, it has to be under a branded Chinese name, and they have to transfer their intellectual property to do it. And that gets to this next problem, which is okay, it's one thing for China to have that as their goal. Okay, maybe if they did it by having a really good research and development tax credit or supporting world-leading research universities, we could say, okay, good luck, we're going to compete with you, and you do the best you can, we'll do the best we can. That's not really what their core strategy is. Their core strategy is what we would term innovation mercantilism, to support indigenous innovation. What they mean by indigenous innovation is innovation by Chinese companies. That's really an important thing. They don't mean innovation in China by foreign companies. That used to be their strategy. They moved away from that in 2006 with their medium and long-term plan on science and technology. So these practices essentially include an array of what I think everybody would term as unfair practices. One is forced technology transfer. If you want to do business in China as a tech company, you have to give them their technology. In the last 3 years, the kind of technology they're forcing is significantly better and more advanced than what they used to force. It used to be if you were a tech company, you could get away with giving them pretty inferior technology and they'd accept it. Those days are now gone. You've got to give them really good technology and do a JV or you're shut out of the market. IP theft, that's again well documented, whether that's just pure straight up industrial espionage with spies in the US, cyber attacks, you just look at software, for example, 75% of the software the Chinese companies use is pirated, which is a straight up theft. Curtailment and outright denial of access to Chinese markets. So the Chinese government launched an initiative a few years ago called the DIOE campaign, in other words, like DE and then IOE. IOE stands for IBM, Oracle, and EMC. What that meant was they were going to put real pressure on all the SOEs and the related companies, just simply no longer can you buy IBM, Oracle, or IBM technology. Now some of the companies fought back against that because US technology is still superior, but that sort of tells you the tactics that they will use. Manipulation of technology standards. I mean, no other country is doing this at the extent of China right now, including internet protocols, wireless local area networks, audio-visual codec standards, home networking, RFID, encryption, software asset management, mobile phone charging, you name it, Internet of Things. The Chinese are developing their own standards. Again, every other country in the world, the Japanese, the Germans, everybody goes with globally industry-led voluntary standards. Chinese developing their own in order to keep out foreign companies and then to be able to force licensing deals. And then capricious use of the anti-monopoly law to force companies to give them good deals. We saw that with the Qualcomm case where they just simply said, you got to start selling your IP license for your wireless chips and software at a lower price. And Qualcomm had no choice but other to do it. And lastly, this came up a little bit on the first panel, government subsidized acquisitions of IT firms. I mean, it's one thing for a Canadian company or a French company to come in here and buy one of our companies. They're doing it to make a profit. The Rhodium Group showed that in the last few years, 99% of Chinese acquisitions, Chinese investment in the US technology sector were acquisitions. So this notion that they're doing a lot of greenfield is just not simply the truth. What's going on is they're doing acquisitions. The problem with that is that most of those acquisitions are government backed. They're using money that the government has given the companies. A good example of that recently was when Lexmark was bought by Apex Microelectronics. This was you look at this case and you got to shake your head. Apex Microelectronics was a small company in China that made most of its money selling pirated printer cartridges. There were patent suits by both HP and Lexmark against them for violating their patents and selling counterfeit secondary market printer cartridges. They then got $2.6 billion from the National Integrated Circuit Fund, and were told specifically by the Chinese government to use that money to buy Lexmark in order to, quote, dominate the global printing industry. So these are not market-based transactions. If this was a market-based transaction, that transaction would never, ever have occurred. So I just close by saying, I think the way to think about Chinese, what's the one sort of explanatory variable, I think, that explains pretty much everything they're doing with their technology policies, and that is essentially a take technology strategy. They simply don't have the technology they need domestically to sort of gain significant market share. It probably would take them another 15 to 20 years to begin to catch up. And so I thought a really interesting quote, and I'll stop, by Bain Consulting, who was counseling Chinese companies on how to gain advantage. And Bain said in this little statement, quote, since reaching scale through organic growth would be an almost insurmountable challenge. In other words, if you just grew like a normal company, it's really, really going to be hard to go after the leaders because they're so much more advanced than you are. Therefore, quote, domestic Chinese players should look for partnerships often with followers with strong IP that can benefit from funding and access to Chinese markets. What does that mean? That means don't go with a partnership with the leader, because they're not going to partner with you. Go with a partnership with the second or third industry company in there, and then tell them that they can get market access in China to go after the leader. And that's exactly what they've done in computing, in servers, and many, many other industries. It's a very, very clever strategy, because the third follower is like, well, I can win a little bit in the short run by going after the my counterpart in the U.S. who's the leader, and by the time I get hurt, maybe it's 10 years and I'm no longer in the company. And then last, they say, and then look for takeover opportunities of companies looking to leave the industry or divest. So in other words, there's a lot of companies now in the U.S. who see the handwriting on the wall and say it's going to be really, really hard for us to compete, particularly in semiconductors where the Chinese are putting in place massive subsidies. Maybe I should get out. Well, when you look at the Chinese deals that have either been done or proposed, they're usually anywhere between a 30 to 40% price premium over what the market price would be. So it's a pretty sweet deal. If you're a company thinking you're going to have a hard time competing with this unfair competition, and somebody comes to you with a deal backed by government money that gives you a 40% price premium, hard to walk away from that deal. So I think that's essentially what we're looking at, and I think absent some significant changes in how we deal with Chinese technology mercantilism, I would say in 10 years we're going to see a smaller U.S. global market share.